the weekly podcast where people reach their goals and develop confidence one mind shift habit at a time. Let's join our host, certified coach Christina.
This episode of Conversations with Coach is sponsored by Christina Callaway, Life Coaching LLC. I am pleased to announce I will be releasing my very first book in 2023 entitled The Mindset Playbook, a guide for athletes to help them identify and overcome mental and performance blocks. There will be information in the show notes where you can support my efforts. If this is your first time joining Conversations with Coach, welcome. I am your host, certified mindset and confidence coach, Christina Callaway, and I partner with athletes, parents, coaches, and organizations, and together we develop the tools they need to increase their confidence and achieve their goals both on and off the field of play. What do the names Ron Galimore, Chaney Umphrey, Dianne Durham, Wendy Hilliard, Betty Okino, Gabby Douglas, and Simone Biles have in common? You guessed it. They are all gymnasts. They are all Black gymnasts. As a young gymnast in the early 70s, I was used to being the only Black gymnast on my team, as well as the only Black gymnast at the competitions that I participated in. And we traveled all over the United States for my competition. And it wasn't until I got to a competition in California, it was the national championships, as a matter of fact, that I saw one other Black person. For the most part, I spent the majority of my gymnastics career as the only Black gymnast, especially in my region, which is Region 8, and in my state, the state of Georgia. While I did get used to the fact that it was just the way it was, I still longed to have someone that looked like me compete in my meets. I also knew at a very young age that I would one day become a coach, and it would then be my opportunity to make a difference in the lives of young Black children who desired to participate. And today, I am a gymnastics director having that impact. On this episode of Conversations with Coach, I am joined by a guest who decided she too wanted young Black gymnasts to know their own heritage in the sport they love so much. Let me introduce her, just give you a little bit background about her. Her name is Jada Nichols. She is based in Atlanta, and she is a women's wellness consultant. She practices in the areas of occupational therapy, yoga, and lactation support. When she's not caring for new parents and their babies, she is cheering on her daughter, Lotus, in ballet, Chinese dance, band, and gymnastics. Woo, this child is busy, and so is her mama. She's doing a lot. I love her name, by the way. I want you to put some love in the chat, and please help me welcome our guest, Jada Nichols. Hi, Jada.
Hi, Christina. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure and my honor for you to be on here. Just to share with my audience that we started following each other on social media. Was it through Brown Girls Do Gymnastics that
Yes.
Yeah, it was through that. And then you started talking about the subject that we're going to be talking about on this episode. And I got so super excited. But the other thing, when I started following you on social media, I learned something that I did not know. I learned a couple of things. One of the things that I learned was the fact that your daughter has something that I didn't have. Not only is she not the only Black gymnast on her team, her team is all Black. And that was just so phenomenal. But that second thing that I learned, I didn't know where you were located at that time. And then when you put your gym name in, I was like, that exists here in Georgia. And not only that, they are phenomenal. They are winning state championships. They're sending girls to regionals. They are doing all the things. And my heart just got super proud and happy. So congratulations on that. Now, I was sharing a little bit about Lotus. That's your daughter's name, right?
Yes.
Love the name.
Yes. Thank you.
I did not realize that she was not just only a gymnast, but that she is also actively involved in cheering and that she is in ballet. Chinese dance? Share a little bit about that.
So she's not a cheerleader. But yes, ballet and modern dance with the Atlanta Ballet, and we're right in the middle of Nutcracker season right now.
Fun.
And she is she does Chinese dance. So the way that we got into that, she spent kindergarten through third grade at a dual language immersion school, and the language that she learned every other day, so half of her school time was spent in Mandarin.
Wow.
And during that time, I mean, she started in kindergarten, and it was the end of the year before she even knew that her Mandarin teacher knew how to speak English, which she very much did, but they never hear them speak English. So they are very much immersed in the language and the culture. And it's the only way that she knew how school should be. I mean, she was reviewing, Mandarin numbers 1 through 20 with me or teaching me the numbers. And she's like, and 17. And I'm like, I don't know. She said, why don't you know? And I'm like, I never learned Mandarin. Like, this isn't a normal thing.
Yes, absolutely.
She really fell in love with the dances and the games and the candies and everything. And so we went to a Chinese dance recital that was held locally, and she was just like looking at the stage and I want to do that. And so we enrolled several months later. She is now not at that school anymore. She's actually at a school for the performing arts.
Right.
Not learning Mandarin every other day, but she did not want to give up learning Mandarin altogether. So we're in Mandarin tutoring 1 day a week still. And
that's awesome.
She did not want to give up Chinese dance. So we're still doing that.
That's awesome. I absolutely love it. I am inspired by her zeal to just expand. And I'm there with you. When it comes to learning another language, I don't know if I just waited too late. My brain is like, girl, what are you thinking? I don't know, but I do have a desire to learn it. So I'm not going to give it up. I do want to learn to speak Spanish. I've taken, I won't even tell you how many classes I've taken. I should be able to write it with as many classes I've taken. But so I'm right there with you. I would like for you, so you heard me in the beginning, right before I brought you on, I shared some names that some people that are watching were going to be very familiar with, especially by the time I got to Simone Biles and Gabby Douglas. And then yet others, the other names, they're probably thinking, yeah, I'm not really sure. Ron Galimore, Chaney Umphrey, Wendy Hilliard, Dianne Durham. Yeah, not really sure about who those are. And I would like for you to talk about your story, your connection to gymnastics.
Yeah, so it sounds like our stories are pretty similar. I was the first, I was the only. I grew up in Ohio and started in Dayton, ended up in Cincinnati before I moved to Atlanta. So was definitely the first, the only, and I did not see other Black gymnasts anywhere. Wow. I did not see them, and I did not. I mean, it was evident that I was the only, but it wasn't, at the time, it was not a negative experience.
No.
It just
Right.
was, as I think you said.
I said it was what it was.
It just was.
Mm-hmm.
And it I saw my first Black gymnast at a competition that I was not competing in, and you'll know why in a minute. But in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
1991 was the first time I saw another Black gymnast at a gymnastics
Mm.
competition, and that gymnast was Betty Okino at Worlds
Yes.
in Indianapolis, Indiana. So my team and I drove. I was kind of the little runt on the squad at that point, but we drove up to one of the older girls. Drove up to Indianapolis to watch Worlds. That's the year that Kim Zemeskel won, and she was,
Yep.
all of these things, and she absolutely was.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw Betty Okino, and I was just like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
they are somewhere else.
Right.
We are, wait a second. And because there was no, Betty Okino didn't have a Instagram account
Nope.
at the time.
Not then she didn't. That's
No,
true.
we were not following gymnasts in that way. And so
Right.
I saw her, and at one point, they were so little. The little team walked past us, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's her. And I was the only person as excited. My mother wasn't even there on that day, or else she would have been. But it was the rest of my teammates. And it's not that they thought that it was crazy. It just did not have the same impact on them.
It did not. They couldn't have that appreciation. Right.
No.
Absolutely.
And
Mhm.
and that impacted me. And this is the year before the Olympics. So the next year is now Betty Okino and Dominique Dawes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're coming. This thing is really,
Yes.
revving up. By this time, though, I was moving away. Like, the Olympics were not on my radar at that point.
Yeah.
College was not even on my radar, to be honest, college
Mhm.
gymnastics. Because a couple of years earlier, I had several years earlier, I guess, I had seen the movie School Days, and I was watching A
Mm.
Different World every week by this time.
Mhm.
And I
Yes,
knew I
ma'am.
was going to an HBCU.
Yeah.
And I knew that HBCUs did not have gymnastics teams, and that was okay, right?
Mhm.
And so
That's right.
there's this whole other Brown Girls Do Gymnastics conversation about
Mhm.
the girls who choose one over the other. And now we're
Yeah.
at the point, to some extent, where, not every girl has to, but yeah, I had, it was, gymnastics was something I was doing at that point for fun.
Mhm.
And I was just like, yeah, I'm going to an HBCU. I'm continuing gymnastics, but oh my gosh, look at this Black girl. And now look at that other Black girl. This is
Yeah.
amazing.
Amazing. Exactly. To your point, I remember the 96 Olympics here in Atlanta. My older sister actually got me tickets, and we actually went to one of their sessions. And I will never forget, I was like talking distance from where our seats were to where the athletes were. And I remember Dominique walking by, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I am this close to her. And to your point, because of where we were in the times of social media and technology, just wasn't where it is now. However, it's one of those things that you would search for a news article to hear, just a little blurb about, like Betty Okino or Dominic. You just want to know what they're doing, and you're rooting extra hard for them because you and I could identify with them being the only one. And
Yeah.
so many girls out there are like us. And I'm really glad, to your point, organizations like Brown Girls Do Gymnastics and them putting the attention on that, yes, brown girls can do this sport and that they should do this sport, and this is why. And for anyone that's watching this episode, this is not to disparage any other ethnicity or race. We are simply sharing our experiences having been gymnasts, Black gymnasts, during a time when hardly there wasn't anyone that looked like us, or if there was, they were so few and far in between. There was an excitement. So I hope that while you're listening and enjoying this conversation between Jada and I, that you will look at it through that lens of us sharing our experience, and that through this sharing that you will be able to appreciate when you go into some place where people don't look like you, they're different, and maybe have a little bit more empathy of, I wonder what this experience is like for them. You did mention about being at, HBCU, you knew just from the beginning, is a wrap. There is nothing else. I don't care what. And so that gave up that desire. Even if you wanted to do collegiate gymnastics, you knew that you wanted to be HBCU first, and then gymnastics was going to be second, and it just separated the two. Thankfully, now we've got our very first HBCU gymnastics program at Fisk University, and I am so proud to be able to say that I'm working with those girls as their performance and mindset coach. It is my honor. I'm learning and growing with them, but it's super exciting to be a trailblazer for the HBCUs. And I'm just excited with over probably in the next 3 years, how many more are going to be able to add those programs in. So yes, to your point, you are absolutely right about that. And it's a shame that it ended up having to, for you and so many others that had the desire to want to continue their gymnastics, however, had to sacrifice it so that they could have their dream of going to an HBCU.
Yeah. And I want to, so my father went to an HBCU and my big cousins went to HBCU. So it is what I knew. I was, in addition to school days in a different world, it is what I knew. I was in Ohio at the time. So Ohio State was on the radar for a little while. But honestly, once I moved away from Ohio to Georgia, it was like, never mind. But so it's not to disparage. This conversation is not to disparage any other race. It's also not to disparage those who attend and thrive at non-HBCUs, PWIs, because I kind of get this conversation often leads me to that. Like, well, there's nothing wrong with it. And there's not. If that's what you want to do and that's where you want to be, that's amazing. I am also rooting for and have been all the girls on all the teams who have been everywhere else, because the Fisk team has not even had their first competition yet. And I've been rooting for Black girl gymnasts forever.
Right. And I think
and gymnasts forever.
And gymnasts forever. And I think to your point that we want to keep emphasizing to the listening audience, it is not a disparate, or we're not trying to slight anyone or elevate someone over the next, but it is to draw attention to the fact that for Black athletes, gymnasts who want to continue their education at an HBCU, that they would have to sacrifice that. Right. And what we're doing is drawing attention and saying, that shouldn't be. But we're also, the purpose of us having this conversation is because your daughter, and both you and your daughter, have written a very important book, and it is going to be released in February. And I absolutely love the title of it, Balance of Power, 50 Years of Black Gymnasts. And I think that is just so important. I want people to be able to get that information, that 50 years is not a long time. I will just put that out there. 50 years is exactly how many years ago that I started gymnastics. And it's not a long time ago. And for us to have a significant discussion about that and what actually drove you and inspired you and your daughter to write this book, just share a little bit about why you wrote the book.
Yeah, so I took my daughter to so my daughter is a gymnast. I did not put her in gymnastics super duper early. She was, I'll probably post a little bit later today. She was always climbing on things. She was climbing up the pantry and jumping off the sofas and all of these things. And I was a stay-at-home mom for a little while. And my husband was, I would say, I think we should put her in gymnastics.
Yeah.
And he's like, you just want her in gymnastics because you were in gymnastics. And I'm like, no, she's at the top of our pantry right now.
Like, this might be necessary.
I think we need to harness some of this. So
yeah.
I eventually got her into gymnastics, and she started off like, most start off recreational, on the recreational team. And then she had 2 skills left to learn or perfect. And the recreational teacher came out and told me that she was, that she needed these 2 skills and that I could work with her on them with her. And then she would move up to team. She would be assessed to move up to team. And about 2 weeks later, this beautiful coach announces that she is going back on her Disney cruise ship to be Princess Tiana.
Oh, no.
So she does that, and we continue to, applaud her and follow her. My daughter stayed in recreational classes, but that program itself did not really progress. They weren't assessing girls throughout.
Yes.
And so my daughter stayed where she was. And then COVID hit. My daughter's 9. So this is, that long ago. So then COVID hit, everything shut down. We did the best that we could do kind of on Zoom and did that for a couple of months. And then it was either team or nothing. So we were nothing. And my daughter just continued to climb the walls.
Went back to that wall climbing.
Right. And so we were really, out of gymnastics, but she was still into or interested in a lot of things. I said she was in band, but she plays the guitar. She plays the piano as well. I know piano's right.
Love it.
And so she was in enough to keep her busy.
Sure.
And I saw that, Darren Moore, who is the founder of Brown Girls Do Gymnastics, had reopened her circus gymnastics classes way across town. And I said, well, let's just try something. And my daughter loved it. So she's on the trapeze, she's walking on the balls, she's, doing all of these things and silks, I believe. And she loved it. And I said, okay, well, gymnastics is back. We can, we might be able to do a little something. And then we completely separate from that, get a Facebook message from Princess Tiana, who has taken at this point 9 girls to the national competition, and they all did very well.
Yeah,
and was now and that was under the leadership of the old gym, but she was their coach. And then she started her own gym. So she said, is Lotus still interested in gymnastics? I said, no, we've kind of gone away from that. She's been out for 2 years. I don't really think that she can get back into it. She said, well, I'd love to just see her. And she saw her and please, yes, let's do this. And we did. And it was at this point at a gym, our facility at this point was way far away. Like 40 minutes from our house compared to the 15 minutes that it was before COVID hit.
Right. Yeah.
And we made it work. They had a great season. At the beginning of the season, we went to, closer to the point, we went to see the Simone Biles Gold Over America tour. And I believe we skipped practice to do it.
Like everybody else that was sitting in there.
Everybody else, right? And I was, 2 things. I was sitting in front of this trio of gymnasts, like a mom and 2 daughters. The daughters were adults. Mom had competed her whole life. Her daughters had competed through college, and one of the daughters was coaching at the time. Like they were in it. Right? In it. I was there with my daughter, and then there were just, gymnasts everywhere. Okay.
And gymnastics fans. Yeah.
Gymnastics fans, right? They know the sport in and out. Could talk rings around us. And we get to I'm talking to them like, oh my gosh, look at that. Miss Val was there from UCLA. So
Oh, yes,
her on the floor.
exactly.
So it's great. My daughter doesn't know, like, all this is kind of going over her head.
But mom is like fanning out right
Yeah,
now.
totally. And with these women too.
Right.
And so Simone gets to the tribute piece, this pre-recorded tribute piece where she's paying honor to all of the gymnasts who have inspired her and the other gymnasts who were on the tour. So it is, Kathy Johnson, it's Kim Zmeskal, it's Nastia Lukin, it's all of these people. And so these women behind me are calling out their favorites and their contemporaries. And I said, I turned around and I said, I hope she gets to Betty Okino. And all three of them, 2 generations. Who's Betty Okino?
Ooh. Wow.
And I'm like, did I make up that she was an Olympian and a world champion? Am I just...
No, you didn't make it up.
Okay, why don't they know her?
I understand. Mm-hmm.
Right? So that was kind of strike one. And then she gets to the end and Dianne Durham is on the last slide.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this pitter-patter applause. Not like everybody was grieving, but like nobody knew who she was.
Oh, wow.
And it was so
Had
sad.
she passed at that point?
Yeah,
or she had just passed. Okay,
it was in
okay.
memoriam. So if nothing else, read the articles, the plethora of articles that have been written about her since her passing. So this was in October of 2021. And she passed in February. So so February 4th is the date that she passed. It is the date that the book will be released on purpose.
Oh my goodness. I absolutely love that. Yeah. How involved is your daughter in the writing of the book and all of that? How involved was Lotus?
We came up with her list, came up with my list, figured out where they would match. And let me say that I thought that we would end up with 20 or so gymnasts. All right. We'd be lucky if we got to 20 gymnasts. Oh, because let me just say the other thing is a couple of months later at her own meet, she competes. So nobody knows Dianne Durham, right? In this whole place. These ladies didn't know Betty Okino. So I'm like super offended with the whole thing. My daughter competes on beam. I think she won beam at this particular event. And I said, wow, Lotus, you remind me of Betty Okino on beam.
Oh, and that's a huge compliment because
she's shaped. They have similar body types, and I don't have that body type. And
that means she's a great beam worker because Betty Okino is phenomenal on beam.
She said, "Who's Betty Okino?" And I'm like, "Not my
Your own child."
What is going on? So that is when I really decided to write the book.
Absolutely. I love that.
So she came up with her list. I came up with my list, and her list was like Gabby Douglas, Simone Biles.
Yeah.
And so at this point, we've been through like COVID learning, and she knows how to ask Siri questions and look up things. So I said, why don't you ask Siri to help you find the first Black gymnast at the Olympics, and ask Siri to help you find the first Black gymnast who went to college and competed. And so we started with there, and I knew the answers to some of those. Some of those I did not. I knew, and then I thought that I knew the answers to others. And I'm like, oh gosh, there was a person even before her, right?
Yeah.
So this is how our list came to be. And then the list at one point had gotten up to 37 phenomenal gymnasts.
Wow. And this
And I
is
said, I can't.
male and female, right? Male and
No,
female.
this book is
Just female.
female.
Oh,
This book is female.
wow.
28 women. And it goes from it goes from a name that most will not know. I'm dropping the names. I'm doing a 12 days of gymnast.
Okay.
In December.
Okay. That's fine. We'll don't share anymore. That's enough.
But it goes from a name that most will not know, but really, really should.
Yep.
To, you know, a world champion or two.
Yeah, or two or three.
Or three. Yes. So yeah, so we dialed it back, and then the way that we reduced it down to the at one point we had 25 for a really long time. And we dialed it back by reading through the stories. So my daughter would read through their information. She would find out what she thought was cool. She would say, you know, yeah, we have to tell them about this, you know. And she would also say things, ask questions like, well, why did they do that to her? Why did they say that to her?
Right.
Why did those moms treat her that way? Right.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right. So your desire to educate your daughter brought about this book writing. So as a person, which I announced at the beginning of this episode, that I'm writing my first book, how much is this your first book, or how did, because most people aren't just going to be like, okay, let me sit down and write a book.
It is the first book that I've completed.
Okay.
I've had writing a book on my list of to-dos for probably 20 years. Probably
Gotcha.
20 years. And the first book that I started to write was a double set, also a children's book. But my best friend was getting married. My niece and nephew were like 5 and 6 at the time, and they were in the wedding. And I wanted to get them a little gift. And there were all of these little books about being the flower girl and being the ring bearer. And none of the children were brown.
Got you.
And my mom, you know, definitely had me in spaces where, again, I was the first, the only.
Yep.
But she was also taking a brown pencil and coloring in greeting cards and Santa Claus and Jesus, right? And so when I saw those books, I'm like, there are no books with any brown anybody on this topic. And Black people get married every day, and they're made, you know, flower girls and ring bearers who are brown.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I started to write that book, and then this is 20 years ago. So it's not like you can go somewhere, you know, make a Facebook post and say, does anybody know a good illustrator? Right.
Or not 20 years ago. Now you can.
Right. Now you can.
Right.
But not 20 years ago.
Right.
So the book was so cute. It was like 2 lines per page, and it rhymed, and it was, you know, all this stuff. I wish I could find it now. But so those were the first books that I wrote. I don't know where they are. Probably on some floppy disk somewhere. And then I've written books about pregnancy and nutrition and pregnancy yoga, but not to completion. And because I think, and I know that you talk about this in your coaching, I think about like imposter syndrome and that spirit of perfectionism. Like, it's really the safest way. And I know what I do is in the best interest of the moms, but like to see it on print. What if a mom does this and then she gets hurt? All of this stuff. So what if she eats this thing, or what if new science comes out and says, no, you should never eat that while pregnant? Oh my gosh, I would not want that.
And you know what's funny, Jada? You know what's funny? It's what you're sharing and the transparency that you're sharing. It's real. It's not just you. It's all of us when we're doing something that's new for us for the first time.
Yeah.
And in your questioning of yourself, the what ifs, I call them the what ifs, those things have happened to others and it didn't stop them, because guess what? The world changes. What we are doing is we are giving people a bird's eye view of where we are right here in time.
Mhm.
And it's not to say that you hope that with growth and especially when it comes to our health and medication and all of the things, we want the treatments to evolve so that we can live longer, healthier lives. And so if I can offer you any sort of encouragement, go back and pick it up, because it is definitely needed. You are reminding me of one of my former guests here on Conversations with Coach is Chide Ibe. He is the Nigerian illustrator who made the depiction of the first Black fetus. And when I interviewed him, his whole thing was representation matters.
Yeah.
And he said that for women, when they go into, and it made me think, I was like, you're right. I've never been into my gynecologist's office and seen a depiction of a pregnant Black woman.
Have not.
And, or what our insides look like. Our insides don't look like, they're not the same color. Like and representation matters. So again, in this episode, what we're doing when we're highlighting and we're talking about the balance of power, and we're talking about the 50 years of Black gymnasts, we're paying homage and we're educating for people who may not know, and for those little brown and Black girls who are gymnasts, to let them know this is who laid the foundation for you to be able to do what you're doing, and that you do have representation and that your representation does matter. I want to ask you, what have been some of the lessons that you've gotten from writing the book?
I think that it is tough. So my strong preference for reading is nonfiction.
Yeah.
Okay? I love to read about people and places and things that are real. And I like to read several accounts of the same event, the event, and I cross-reference and all of these things. And I think that I've just taken for granted how challenging that is. So to write about a person who is deceased is one thing. To write about somebody who's up and walking around is quite another.
Different. Yes, ma'am. It is.
It is quite another, even when talking about past accomplishments, right? So I think that I have just all of these years have taken that for granted, and the amount of research and due diligence and respect and honor that it takes to really portray a living person in this way. I mean, and a person who is deceased as well. So
right.
I will share, obviously, Dianne Durham is in the book. And I have spoken with her husband, who has been so gracious through all of this, with all that they and he has dealt with, and I've gotten his blessing, and her profile, looks the way that he wants it to look. So my daughter and I wrote the information based on what's available out in the public domain, but we then decided, it's a really good idea to check in with these people to see if this is what they want us to write.
Right? Absolutely.
Because it's one thing for like the AJC, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, to write a piece about somebody. It's very much another for, these. I'm interested in gymnastics. I'm not anybody in gymnastics, right? I'm not a professional or an internationally known anything in gymnastics. I'm interested in it. And
not yet. You're about to be, though, with this book.
But so I want it to look the way that they would like for it to look. And
Absolutely.
even if they've already said something or a piece of information is widely known, you
Mm-hmm.
know, do you want that same piece of information to be in this account? Or is it
Good
something
question.
that you'd like to say elsewhere? Right? Because it's a book
Mm.
for young readers.
Mm-hmm.
So, how much are we sharing? What are we
Mm-hmm.
sharing? Is that necessary right now? So,
Mm.
those are the kinds of questions that I've asked myself and that I've asked the gymnasts as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah, that's probably the biggest lesson.
That is super exciting to hear, and just to know that you've been able to make connections with family members, with the athletes, and your daughter is getting to experience that on a whole nother level. So it's a good work all the way around through the education of others, but also your own self-education, and then sharing with family members of those who are no longer with us, as well as just again in a true respectful way. You're wanting to honor them with this book, and I love the fact that it's an early reader book. And as everybody knows that's been following me for any length of time, I am a voracious reader. I do not discriminate on what it is. I mean, in large part, I spend a good bit of my time reading books that's related to what it is that I do. However, I also have tons of children's books, coloring books. Again, I do not discriminate. I love to read, and I am super excited to be able to add this book to my repertoire. And I want to ask you, you mentioned the lessons that you got from writing the book. What is it that you want us, the readers, to gain from the book?
Oh man, there there are so many. I mean, just the stories of resilience,
Mm.
and through everything. We're talking about the physical injuries, okay?
Mhm.
That's really basic
Yeah.
when you have to then think about those who have moved away from home, those who
Mhm.
moved away from home into places that were abusive, those that
Mhm.
moved away from home into places that were abusive and nobody believed them, right?
Correct. Yes,
But
absolutely.
those that, you know, were, just walking around being a brown girl and, being teased because she had too much chalk on her legs. And it wasn't
Yep.
too much chalk, it was just that chalk shows up differently on brown skin.
Yep.
And, those who thought that they needed to change their hair before a meet, right before a meet. We can't change our hair right before anything.
It's
But
not how
right
that
before it
works.
meets, they're
Mhm.
begging, crying to their moms to be able to change their hair so that it can look like their teammates or so that they won't get deductions. I
That is a
remember,
real thing. Let me
no,
tell you something. Sorry to interrupt you. I was this past August when I went to the national conference. They had a panel, a diversity and inclusion panel. It had judges, it had coaches, it had athletes as part of the representation. And it spread the gamut from males were on the panels, black, white, other ethnicities, and the stories that they shared, like from a judging perspective, and listening to them without the admittance, but just saying this is something we have to be more mindful of, because nobody is free of bias.
right,
I don't care what your skin color is, we all have it. And for anyone to say, I don't let that affect me when I'm doing such and such, then you're not
impossible,
human. You're
impossible.
not human. It's not that what we're trying to do is we're not trying to get away from or deny the fact that we have these biases, but what we're trying to do is educate ourselves on how they don't lead our thoughts, our behaviors, and our words. And
Right.
I really did appreciate the conversation. It was not a well attended session.
Yeah.
That was disappointing. And even for those who were in the session, because it fell under a particular category, so those individuals needed to attend it for credit, I sat behind a person who shopped for a vehicle the entire hour, had not heard one word. And this wasn't a parent, this wasn't a coach, this was someone who needed to make sure that she was checking herself and her own biases and that's hard. That's hard for anybody to do that, to say, hey, am I this way? Do I think that first? Are my thoughts leading my actions? That sort of thing. So I wholeheartedly appreciate the fact that you have created this book that is not only going to be a resource for brown and black girls, but that's going to be a resource for everyone. Because to your point, having been that brown girl who gets chalk on her legs, who is then asked a ton of questions, or who's when my hair was done, because I had very, very long hair. So I used to wear the Princess Leia buns on the side, while my counterparts wore their hair in ponytails and curly ponytails. And so it was that constant questioning. Again, I was never in a situation, fortunately for me, where it was negative. I was poorly mistreated. That was never my story, but I do know that that story exists for some people.
Yeah, and I will say that, and the gymnasts in the book are on that entire spectrum. Some are like us. First, only it just was, and they had great experiences and are still very good friends with their teammates and coaches. And there are some who are like, don't mention the name of my club, don't mention my coach, take that out, right? Because I don't want them to get any shine for what, right? So it's the whole spectrum. One, I never knew that I was any good until I went to college. And this person had competed at least through level 10, that, in order to have gotten to college, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I never heard that I was any good until I got to college. Okay. So, and that wasn't my experience. Okay. But that was her experience, and it's a real experience.
Right.
I did get what I would call microaggressions. Well, some straight up deductions. Sometimes my mom still thinks about these. Like, I got deductions for having a wedgie, right? Because this leotard not made for my bottom was going into my bottom. So I got deductions for having a wedgie. And then the next meet, when I pull the wedgie out, guess what? I got deductions again. So there is no winning with this brown girl in her changing body, and this leotard does not fit her. Right. I did have to have conversations about, why do you need to put on lotion right before the meets? And I'm like, because I'm ashy. What does that mean?
Right. I mean, it's the whole educating them of the language.
It's the weight of the whole Black culture on your 10-year-old shoulders. And so it's that, it's the so the other thing that we've done is we've gone back and listened to videos. My daughter and I have watched videos and listened to commentators from the 80s talk about the hind parts, the hind quarters, the 400 horsepower engine legs of these gymnasts, just reducing us to things or animals. Right. And the very next gymnast who gets up, who is not a Black gymnast, just statistically speaking, and she is elegant and skilled and works so hard, and she is the epitome of grace. The very next gymnast, who may or may not have won, depending on which meet we're talking about, right?
Of course,
So these are the differences that even my daughter picked up on. Right. So that's throughout the book. And yes, the book is for everyone. It's for
It
everyone.
is.
It really it is. It's for young readers. So I have, after we've been through editing right before going to copyright, I had her to read it out loud, read everything out loud so that I could hear, like, where did she stumble? What didn't make sense? Was there a sentence that was way too long for a 9-year-old, right, to
Yeah.
digest?
Yeah.
Is the information too heavy? Did she have to pause and take a breath and ask 20 questions? Right.
Yeah.
So we went through all of that. So it's for young readers. It is also for everybody. It
It
is
is.
for former gymnasts. It is for coaches and judges and directors. It is for people who don't know anything about gymnastics. So my sister cousin Bestie, who, by the way, she and her brother used to write me letters. They lived in Maryland, and they used to write me letters and tell me about this young gymnast in the area named Dominique Dawes. Right? Letters. And
Yeah.
they were like, she's in Silver Spring and she's on the news every night and she's going to the Olympics. But my cousin is a singer, and her brother is a CPA, and so they're not interested in gymnastics beyond knowing that I'm interested in gymnastics. And so my cousin, who's a singer, said, I love you and I would, support the book, but I don't know anything about you now. I would be totally confused if I read this book. Right. This is before I started writing it. I just told her, like, I got to get this out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she would. She will buy 5 copies. She will do all the things. Right. And so I really thought about that while writing this book.
Gotcha.
You do not have to be a lover or a knower of gymnastics to appreciate this book.
I love that. And I appreciate you for doing that. Just from talking with you and hearing your inspiration and your motivation and your drive for creating this piece of art, I would venture to say that even non-gymnast athletes, other athletes in other sports, are going to be able to benefit, because it's going to teach them the lesson of how to relate to others who don't look like them.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's just on simple ABC. That's on that.
And just how to reach a goal, right? Because these are Black gymnasts, but not every single thing, not every single topic is centered around Blackness. So how do you get to your goal, right? We know that the lessons in gymnastics of discipline, of strength, of flexibility within your joints, great, but within your mind,
come on,
to be able to come in and do your thing, that you're not doing that dismount because it was stinky in warm-ups 30 seconds before, so now it's out and you've got to do something else.
You got to shift and be ready on a dime. Yeah.
Right. So all of those lessons matter. My goddaughter just, retired from gymnastics. She chose traveling soccer. She was doing both for a really long time and excelling at both, but it got to the point where she needed to choose.
Yeah.
And I told her dad, I said, well, the lessons that she got from gymnastics are going to be great. And he was like, yeah, that's why she's so fast. And that's why she's so strong. I said, but also disciplined, also focused, also he was like, oh man, I never thought about that. Like,
exactly.
Yeah, totally.
It's the well-roundedness that this sport brings. And again, it's not to say that another sport doesn't do it, but the amount of mental strength that it takes to do this sport, to your point, it develops, and it is just the catalyst for so many things, and how it serves us even after we have hung up our grips and hung up our leotards for many, many years. We're still reaping the benefits from our participation in it. I could talk to you, Jada, forever and ever, because everybody knows how much I love gymnastics, all things gymnastics, and how much I love books. So you just hit two of my most favorite things. I definitely would want you to come back in February when the book actually launches. I have been sharing a photo of the book while we have been talking, and absolutely love the color. A picture of Lotus there is so sweet. But I want everyone to know that there is an opportunity for you to do pre-sales. I'm going to provide Jada's social media for you to follow her so that you can be in the know. I'm going to also provide you her website so that you can sign up to get those notifications. I want you to go ahead and pre-order yours, not just one for you. Think about some early readers in your life who could benefit from, first of all, learning their words on sight. Secondly, how they can learn more about how to handle differences, because there's life lessons sprinkled all the way throughout this book. And if you are so inclined, you might think about, if you're a mentor, big brother, big sister for some, you might think about doing a book club centered around this. I'm quite sure Jada and Lotus would love to be your guest if you do a virtual one, or if you're close to their area, they would love to come and talk with you about their book. You can follow Jada on her social media. She's on Instagram at literally.lotus. And our Facebook is literally Lotus without the dot. Again, this information lives in the show notes. You don't have to worry about trying to find it. You can also go onto our website, sign yourself up to go ahead and purchase your book, share it with others, and literallylotus.com. I'm sure you've got somebody that's got a birthday coming up, and we always think about getting them toys, but give them the gift that keeps giving, and that's reading. And I just want to thank you again for being a part of my conversation on this evening. And there's something that I do with all of my guests, and you weren't aware of this, so this is going to catch you by surprise, but you're great and you're going to do fine. It is in the final thoughts. What is the one mindset shift that you would like to leave with the listening audience when it comes to representation mattering?
I would say, I think it's probably jaded, but just that you are enough. I am enough, right? Just I am enough. When developing this, I thought I should just give this, information to somebody else who has more star power, who could, get it out to the masses a lot easier, a lot faster. Maybe I'll just be a ghostwriter for the project. Like, those are thoughts that I had. And, I just kept saying, I'm enough. This is okay. You got this. Like my daughter's team says, you've got this. So I've got this. I've got this.
Yes.
We've got this. Yeah.
You absolutely do have this, and I appreciate you, and I encourage you as you continue on. I'm going to go ahead and claim that you're going to sell 400 copies of it in pre-sales, and then more on top of more, and that you and Lotus will be traveling around to gyms and at different workshops and clinics and conferences speaking about the book. And I'm just excited. I see so much coming from this. So thank you. Thank you for taking enough of an interest in our sport to be able to shine a light on those who paved the way for us to have enjoyed it, as well as for our daughters and nieces and cousins to come after us. So thank you again for joining me.
Thank you.
And there you have it. We've come to the close of Conversation with Coach. And I know what you're thinking. Coach Christina, you never go this long. And you're right. But when it comes to gymnastics, all bets are off. I could talk until the cows come home, literally. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode. I invite you to follow me on all of my social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn at Christina Mindset Coach. I even have a TikTok and a Pinterest page. So you can follow me on there too. Hey, you might just encourage me to get a little bit more active on those platforms. If you are an athlete, a coach, a parent, and you are struggling right now with what you call mental blocks, I encourage you to visit me on my website, set up your free clarity call, and let us discuss exactly what is going on. And I'm pretty sure we might be able to partner and get to the bottom of it so that you could have the success that you're looking for both on and off the field of play. And I want you to know that I appreciate you. I appreciate those who have already supported me in my endeavor to have my book written. I'm super excited, having fun developing it. And the information, again, is going to be in the show notes on how you can support me even further in that. And until the next time, I want you to remember that your life is only as good as your mindset. Thank you for joining me, and make it a great one.
Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Coach. Please be sure to follow Coach Christina on all of her social media platforms. And remember, life is only as good as your mindset.